Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Laura with Connect My Brain. So glad that you are tuning in for our podcast. So today, what we are going to talk about is behavior patterns. First of all, the word behavior, I don't know. I don't think it's necessary to think about everything as a good and bad behavior. It's a common word, so it's easy for us to understand what we're talking about. But children really have their outwardness because of what's going on inside, as well as their development. And there's a balance. Just because I might talk about a developmental sequence, it's not always about don't just write it off, because children also really do need discipline. And I'm gonna really explain why. Now you get to choose your discipline, but they really need think of them as bumper cars. They need those guardrails to know which way to go. So let's first kind of identify some behaviors that are very common in children. So we've got children that might hit a lot. We may have children that cry a lot. We may have children that need to push somebody else down. Maybe they're not using their words. We can have, as we get older, that's very common in toddler land. As we get older, more school age, then we can have anger, and we can have defiance, and we can just have disobedience, and we can have lack of motivation, and we can have lack of follow through. We can have still high emotions, low emotions, of course. And then as we get older, now that we have been around for a while, we might try to start looking for some different type of coping strategies just to really make us feel better. For example, there is a typical pattern that I see that is related to the MTHFR. Those individuals that have a double mutation. What does that really mean? So you do have genes. Those are chromosome passing, coming from mom, coming from dad. MTHFR is our methylation pathway. It is one of our detox pathways. If we have double mutations, especially just on one component, and so most of the lab reports have a C677T, and then there is another one that begins with the letter A. The one that I have found most common with a pattern of the C677T, meaning I am getting a copy of this from both parents. This is the one that has a lot more moodiness. It could also be associated with things like bipolar and schizophrenia. Okay, those are very scary words. You would never take one result of a lab test, of a brain map, of anything, and ever make that kind of a diagnosis. That's number one. And just because it's a risk, it doesn't mean it's a guarantee. That's what I'm all about, is trying to educate on genetics as well as genomics. Genomics is completely different. In fact, my next podcast, that's what I'm going to do a very deep dive on, is genomics. Genomics is more ancestral, generational, epigenetics, things that have actually played upon the gene. Okay. But if I have this double copy, those individuals, they have a really hard time, like in their own skin. And unfortunately, what can happen when people feel that way, not only as a result of MTHFR, but when people feel very uncomfortable in their own skin, they often want to have a getaway strategy. And this is where a lot of addictive behaviors come into play. So I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a counselor, and I'm not trying to play one, but this is what I like to talk about: mental hygiene, not just mental illness, because first of all, if we use the word mental, everybody begins to think that there's a problem when in fact, we all have mental function. So let's refer to it as mental hygiene. Everybody has that. What is your thought life? What is it that you spend all of your time thinking about? Do you have drive? Do you have motivation? That's mental hygiene as well. But individuals that feel like they're not comfortable in their own skin, they often will go into more addictive behaviors because really they're trying to get away from themselves. They need a break from feeling that way. And that can be things like recreational drugs. It can be gambling. It can be pornography, and it can just be phone addiction. We have literally seen young men, especially in their 20s, early 20s, that cannot get away from the phone. And that vertical scrolling on the phone actually enhances dopamine in the brain, which is our reward pathway, which when we do a behavior that is seeming rewarding, we want to continue to do it. So all of these are in that canopy of behavior. Now, I find it very fortunate with the work that I do that I get to see young people. I get to see toddlers. I get to see babies. I get to see school age. I get to see teenagers, and I do see adults as well. But this is an opportunity to be able to educate parents on where things can potentially go if we don't get it under control now. So I'm going to say a lot of things that have to do with parents. And the thing I don't want anybody to do is I don't want you to take this as judgmental. We're all parents, and we've all tried things, and I do believe in our hearts we're doing what we think is in the best interest of our child. So perhaps I can offer a different perspective just to give you something to think about. First of all, behaviors are driven. So let's take the toddler that maybe is a little too physically aggressive. First of all, remember that I'm going to talk always about reflexes because that's how the nervous system, the central nervous system actually gets wired up, is through reflex activity. So there's lots of other podcasts that are speaking directly about the withdrawal reflexes. And I'm going to focus on some of that right now because that's where a lot of the defensive behavior comes into play. So withdrawal reflexes are the first set of reflexes that come on board. And it's literally our learned survival mechanism. So this is where we are literally going to perceive a threat and pull away. In a grown-up version, I'm cooking, I skim my arm on a hot pot, I pull my arm away without even thinking about it. If you've listened to my podcast before, I have said that line so many times. But it's something that's literally hardwired in us. Now, the toddler you have to think about the library. We've talked about this concept before too. How old is the child? If the child has something going on in that developmental journey and it's keeping the sympathetics, fight or flight, up, the longer that goes on, we are going to have to pull resources from somewhere. And if my library is only, I'm 3 or 4 years old, or 2.5, whatever the age is, but like before 5, my library is not very extensive. So where I'm going to go and pull resources from in my brain is from my brain stem. And I'm going to go back to that reflex, and I'm literally going to perceive, okay, this is the foundation that I have for handling something that is being perceived as a threat. Now, none of this is a cognitive conversation. This is all reactive. So a lot of times you may see a little person want to hit more, push more, just be rough. And that's because of the message that they've got going on inside of their head. And you can pick it up. One of the key factors that will let you know that your child is in a heightened state of sympathetics or fight or flight is the pupils of their eyes are going to be ginormous. So when you are in fight or flight, so I'm either thinking I've got to run or I got to fight. That's the two messages. Those pupils will actually dilate, meaning open up, because the job of the eye when I feel that way is I need to let in as much light as I can so that I can make sure that I see everything. In an older kid, they're constantly scanning their environment because we've talked about peripheral vision. That is, it goes completely behind your ears. And what you're doing is you're constantly scanning because now you've been practicing this type of a reaction. And now as you get older, you're literally just looking around going, hey man, am I okay? Because your peripheral vision is tied into how you feel about being safe or not in your environment. Now, again, if this is the pattern that I've practiced, then this is the reaction that I'm going to use to always make sure that I'm safe. And again, this is not a cognitive conversation. This is not your child coming, hey, mom, I really think that there's about to be something come over me. So I'm looking around in order to make sure that I'm okay. No, we are in a reactive state. And this doesn't mean that anything has happened. This could literally just be how the central nervous system began to interpret their environment. And most of the time, when I have toddlers and when I have school age kids, the more that I get the opportunity to actually sit down and talk to the parent, something is always going to come up. Something is going to be revealed. Sometimes it has to do with the state of health mom and dad are in at the time the baby is conceived and during the pregnancy. And I'm going to look at an intake form and I'm going to identify red flags because there are. It could be maybe mom took a fall. Maybe mom was on medication. Maybe something happened with the placenta. I mean, the list is endless. And then, of course, we go into the birth when things are interrupted, like C-sections and using instrumentation to get the baby out. And again, none of this is meant to be bad, but we have to realize that some of these outcomes do have very far-reaching effects on how the central nervous system is going to work. And then if nobody brings it to your attention, then you've also got a child that is continuing to practice this particular pattern. And so there can always be mechanical things. So like a C-section would be considered a mechanical thing. Parent, mom on medication, that's going to be a chemistry thing. And in traditional healthcare, pregnancy is actually considered a disease. It's in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual as a code, and that's where diseases are actually listed. So mom becomes the priority over the baby's life. And so sometimes recommendations are made that way. And I've seen it lots of times. There could be maybe you had some assistance in conceiving a baby. Maybe we're talking now about an adoption. That can also have tremendous impacts on the development of a child. Then we've got the brain component. So remember, Connect My Brain is a 3-tier approach, mechanical, chemical, brain. So when we come into this world, while we are fully formed, we are not fully functioning. So everything that goes on in our life is going to play a part in how that brain is going to wire up. And some of the examples, I think one of the most common examples is children that have, the parents have identified that my child regressed after a vaccine. My child was developing as expected. And then we had one of the shots and my child lost their language, lost their emotional balance. That's probably one of the number one issues that I do hear from parents. And all of those things are going to play an impact on how that child is ultimately going to behave, especially the younger they are, or wherever that development either stopped, regressed, halted. I've got kids that are preteen that I'm just getting the opportunity to start working with them. And they lost their language back when they were a toddler. And now we're getting an opportunity to work with them. And there's a behavior. And sometimes all of the behaviors are easy, and sometimes all of the behaviors are hard. So what do we do about it? Well, I think one of the most important things is to first recognize patterns. Now, let's look at you first, okay? I might put this in the category of a routine. Think about how you get up for your day, you get your family going, maybe you work outside of the home and you get yourself ready for work. You drop the kids off at school. You drive to work. You go that same direction every day. You do what you have to do. And then you close up and then you head home and you get dinner for the family. You get the kids ready for school the next day. And then you get everybody to bed and then you put yourself to bed. Okay. Routines are a good way to understand pattern forming. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is I want you to think about your self-talk. What is it that you're saying to yourself all day long? Are you hopeful? Are you happy? Are you depressed? Do you wish things were different? Do you love the way things are? That thought life is very important in understanding patterns. The more that we continue to follow that routine, we could do it without even really looking at the road. You might be listening to a podcast while you're driving to work, and it's going to take a piece of your conscious mind. And you may not even realize seconds at a time that you're not even looking at the road. That's how ingrained patterns can become. We might have certain patterns in how we eat. One of the things that we do here at Connect My Brain is every child gets a notebook. And part of our program under that chemistry umbrella is nutrition. because we can be really good at doing therapies, but the reality is you must have the right fuel to make everything stick. And especially when I get into the conversation about genomics. And then this truth bomb I'm going to do after this particular podcast, go listen to that as well, because that canopy is huge. And sometimes it's going to feel incredibly overwhelming. If there's anything that I think impacts this program and the outcome, the results, is nutrition, because people are very addicted and pattern driven on their food. So if you were to just kind of analyze, what did you have for breakfast? What did you have for lunch? What did you have for dinner? And begin to look at that over a few days and identify your pattern. I will get my families to do a 3-day food log, and I will see incredible patterns. Sometimes these kids are not getting any protein whatsoever because the child won't eat it. And that is a pattern to recognize in your child. Are you feeding an environment that exists in that child's belly? Now, I understand. Let the kids eat. And sometimes I hear that the pediatrician has told the parent, let your kid eat anything they want. Ice cream, cookies, candy, just to get the calorie, which it's almost in that same category of telling a parent it's not necessary for your child to crawl. And I've heard that one too. So I would completely disagree with that piece of advice. Your child would be driven to eat a particular way based on the environment in their belly. So one, if they avoid protein, that means they can't break it down. Protein is a large molecule. And if I have trouble digesting it, if I have trouble breaking it down, then as a kid, I'm going to avoid. Look at the things that they are avoiding. If I'm feeding them nothing but sugar, you are absolutely feeding a very harmful environment in the belly. These are known as biofilms. We have healthy biofilms and we have unhealthy biofilms. And this literally is an ecosystem that's being created in the gut. It will grow, multiply, mutate, and then dump. And it will create very cyclic-like behavior. And after it dumps, it just starts all over again. And it literally will drive your child to only eat certain things because it's very powerful. Think about when you were pregnant, especially if I have a female audience. But if you're a male and you're listening to this, what did your wife crave while she was pregnant? So I think I shared with you all years ago, I was a competitive bodybuilder. And I had literally shredded beef kind of a body. I worked this for 5 years to go into a non-drug competition that also had the female division. Those are very hard to find sometimes. But I ate so pristine. Now, part of it was actually unhealthy because I wasn't eating enough fat, but I didn't learn that until later. But when I conceived my first baby, I only wanted peanut butter and bacon, like a Reese's peanut butter cup. What is that? That is fat and protein. So what my body needed the most to take care of the life growing inside of me, it drove me. Now, I do eat bacon, non-sugar bacon. I'm not a peanut butter person. I'm a pecan butter person. But I'm trying to bring a point home that what your body is harvesting inside. You're going to go after it. Wonder if I needed essential fatty acids, some zinc, some protein. I might go eat the tuna fish in the refrigerator. So that's the way I want you to think about the pattern that's related to the gut. And these kids that are eating nothing but complex carbs that break down to sugar, and avoiding things like protein, you don't have the fuel you need to put things back together. This is a pattern. And especially if you're going to associate that with a behavior. I can tell you right now, the child that eats like that, they don't feel good. And they're not going to be pleasant all the time. They're not going to be motivated. So this is where I want you to start to understand whatever the fuel is, it's also impacting the behavior. I asked this one little boy one day, I said, what happens to you when you eat sugar? He looked at me spontaneously and said, oh, Dr. Hansen, it makes me crazy. Now, if the child can tell you that, who needs to be the parent? And this is where it's going to get hard, and I'm sorry. But who needs to be the parent and stop buying it and stop giving it to them? We have got to first heal the gut. So I understand. I've got lots of kids around here that parents will tell me, if I take that away, they're not going to eat anything. Okay. So we're going to go through like a scale. This is where we are right now. So I'm holding my hands up, and the scale side that's heavy is where these are all the foods that would be better if we remove them. Okay. So with children, the easiest way to go about this is first you heal the gut. You take away the gasoline that's feeding the fire. You don't want to create more stress at home, but you do have to do some things. So I find when families pull together and work on a gut cleanse, and we guide you through everything, and it's a very simple cleanse. Let me just give you this one little sidebar. Cleanses should not be quick. Cleanses should not be aggressive. Cleanses are meant to match the body, the way the body gets rid of things. And the only way to do that is you must match how the body does it. So this isn't about trying to create eruptions in the body. It's about bringing the body along and allowing it to heal over a period of time. It is such a safe little cleanse. I really encourage my entire families to do it as a family. Because one, it's never easy when the child is held out. Like, you can't do something, but I can. But when we work on something together, it makes a really big difference. You know, over on Instagram, we did a post of a dad and a son cooking in the kitchen. And it really is so cute to see the two of them having fun together. And one, it's a great way to bring your child into the awareness of food when they get to be part of it. And, you know, you get cutting gloves and you make sure that they're safe, but it really is a wonderful way to help a child begin to understand the process of making a grocery list, going to the grocery store, buying the food, coming home, preparing. It's also a great math lesson. You're using measuring cups. You're using measuring spoons. You're able to bring some of these dynamic principles of life into reality, and they get to touch it. Now, never forget, anything that we can get the children using their own hands is going to make a very big difference, especially if you look at the image of a homunculus. We've put this image up in show notes before. Go explore the podcast. There's all kinds of different ones that give you little pearls, something that may work for your family that you haven't tried. But it is so important for us to stay open. Those hands represent huge real estate on the homunculus. The homunculus is the sensory motor cortex where your entire body is mapped out. So if I walk that little thought backwards, we're always looking at the mechanical part. You're thinking about kids that have problems with handwriting. Watch them do their handwriting. Do they have their hand completely wrapped around the pencil like a death grip? That's a palmar reflex. So again, when it comes to kids, we've got to be able to recognize the patterns. Where are we avoiding? Where are we so stuck that our scales are imbalanced? And yeah, it may take you some time, but as you heal that gut, you're actually changing the palate and you'll be able to put different foods in there. But I really do believe that step one for all parents is you must become aware of the situation. Now, I'm going to bring in another concept. Especially if this has been going on for a while. If you feel like your child is basically running the house. If you feel like your child is running the house or everybody has to, tiptoe on eggshells or completely modify what you really believe should be done, that is a red flag. And the longer that goes on, the harder it is to change because now we've gone through some maturation and the longer anything goes on, it's impacting the real estate of the brain. I have said this before with chronic stress, and you can plug in chronic behavior, chronic malnutrition, chronic moodiness, chronic anything. The longer something goes on, you are surrendering real estate in your brain, and it is becoming more repetitive, more rooted, and it's hard, especially when these kids get to be school age. You're just trying to keep it all together. You're just trying to get to school. You're just trying to make sure they get their homework done. You're just trying to make sure they pass. But wait a minute, in all of I'm just trying, ... they're missing out on childhood. And this is not going to magically just go away. Remember how we started this conversation about the 20-year-olds that have come in here and the addictive tendencies they've already demonstrated? If we don't get to the root, and it can be plural, if we don't get to it and literally pull out the weeds and get rid of it, and you take charge of your home again, this is not going to just go away because your child gets older. It just doesn't work that way. It just kind of gets put in the blind spot of the existence of your life and their life. When something becomes chronic, you have to be ready to roll up your sleeves and change your own patterns of managing these behaviors. Now, here at Connect My Brain, this is what we want to help with. I will get pretty transparent with parents. If they wish for me not to, it may not be the right fit, and that's okay. You have to find the right fit. But I want to get resolution. I want you, your family, to get your life back. I want these children to be whole and complete. And I want them to have the tools and strategies that is going to help them become a productive member of society. And especially with all of the things, there's so many things working hard against all of us right now. And I don't know that it's going to get any easier. I don't. So even more of a reason that we have clear thinking children that grow up to be clear thinking adults. And anytime there is any kind of mechanical interruption, it's going to have a feedback to that developing brain. And it's going to impact critical thinking because that frontal lobe, this thing up here in the front above my eyes, the frontal lobe, that is executive function. And that's the last part of the brain to come online. But it is influenced by the whole developmental journey. So depending upon what that child's got going on will tell you exactly what's going to happen as that frontal lobe comes online. That may be what you are dealing with right now is executive function dysfunction. So the time is now. Call us up, reach out through the website. You will talk to me personally. We will hear your personal story. Everybody has a very unique story, and I will help you connect the dots because that's what Connect My Brain is all about, helping you understand. We just started a new little patient in the office, and one of the greatest compliments that could ever be bestowed to me was both parents said to me, "You have identified our child completely just through your assessment because I know how to look at the development of a child. I've been doing this for 30 years and I have been graced with this commission to be able to bring things together. And I do want resolution. I want recovery, and I don't want your family constantly living in some kind of therapeutic model. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's change your child's life. Let's change your perspective. Let Connect My Brain help you connect the dots." Thanks for tuning in and be blessed.